Hello, trading is closed on December 17th, 2020. Time for our disclaimer, time for our calls. It's my plan for tomorrow, December 18th. Just remember, no guarantee I'm right, and if we get sharply in the undesired direction, calls kill before the open, and I am expecting a pretty big gap at tomorrow's open, even though futures are a little changed right now. Just because I'm expecting it, that doesn't mean it'll happen. My address is MEJT.trades@gmail.com. So much for the preliminaries. We said if the bulls wanted to continue the rally, they'd have to gap over yesterday's high, and that's what they did. We're pretty much in the same situation today. We'll come back to this in just a minute. Early on, MEJT said ultimately lower price it would print, but they said we get with a high degree of confidence, but not absolute certainty, saying we trade higher and lower, and all those things played out. We had an ultimate sell in the afternoon. Ultimately, we did drop, and it said this drop and this rally weren't for keeps. So it did its job once again. This is a very suspicious pattern for me. This is the pattern with the early high, and tomorrow's pattern also has the early high. This pattern typically is a rally a day. Typically it rallies with a new high into the close. That didn't happen. If it doesn't happen, you tend to get a straight line drop. That didn't happen. So, if the normal course of events plays out, we should get a pretty sharp move at tomorrow's open, either gapping up to new highs or a straight line drop. What makes me suspicious here is you traded gapping up to a resistance area, as we'll see, at the high of the day real early, and despite rallying most of the day, only could manage a Fibonacci retracement. Just a review of what we said yesterday. Commonest thing is a gap and prompt move outside the day's range. Now, we stopped today right at this trend line. You can see it has all kinds of hits going way back into, I guess, early June. When you hit the trend line this many times, usually you break through it at some point. And if you're going to break through it tomorrow, you really want to gap over it, which means gapping over today's high. When you rally to a trend line like this, either you gap over it or the trend line wins, and gapping over it isn't impossible at all. But if we don't, it's very strong resistance, as we'll see. Well, we never give up on this rising wedge, ending diagonal triangle, whatever you want to call it. It's possible to relabel this as B, and if you look here just at the count in the rectangles, you can count this as A, B, C, D, and if they had C, the party's over. And what's suspicious here is if you take the first leg up, set it to 61.8%, you get 100% exactly at today's high. You also get this pullback right at that same 61.8%. So the Fibonacci grid is complete at this point. Now, if you just focus on the CDE, we've shown the D many times, but you've got an A, a B, and the C. C is equal to A. You have an A, a B, a C. You've got a perfect 5 waves up for A, B, C. You don't get fibs much more in alignment than this. It doesn't mean the count's right, doesn't mean it's the only count. But when you've got multiple waves all ending at the same place, It's very strong as a resistance area. So really you want to gap over it convincingly or the resistance wins. So we have a bunch of Fibonacci stuff. We have trend lines. We have strong resistance at this point, plus a pattern which either has to gap up over this high strongly or is in line for a big drop right at the open. And if we do get a big drop and undercuts yesterday's close, it's the market's way of telling us this whole island here was a false move. And if that's a false move and if the big move is down, not saying it'll happen, but if it happens, I would believe that at last count, and I think the party's over, even though I think this will retrace at some point. Doesn't mean you won't go much lower first. I still would prefer that any drop wait until 2021, but I have to look at the indicators as they show up. And if we have a big drop tomorrow, it's time of the year or not, I'm going to have to believe it. Tomorrow's pattern has a really high. We could gap down. We neither rally to a new high in the final hour, nor do we have a straight line drop. I'm hoping that situation is going to be rectified at tomorrow's open, either by gapping up to a new high, doesn't mean we'll hold it, new high, or having a straight line drop. And if we do have a straight line drop, which I'm not calling one way or the other, I'd be very leery of a gap under yesterday's close. If that happens, and that's an if, it would imply today's rally was a false move and very likely would mark the end of this leg up. So we're looking for another mixed signal. One of the reasons I don't like this is if you're in a big impulsive move up, you don't tend to get mixed signal after mixed signal after mixed signal. You tend to get a straight line move up higher, not a bunch of questionable patterns, which only get resolved when the market reopens. So tomorrow's pattern has the early high, but that doesn't mean you won't get down. Looking for a sizable move at the open. And if it's down, you've got very strong resistance at today's highs, and I would think it would have legs. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but if it happens, I'd be on alert. And that is today's call.